Thank you. I'll declare the meeting open at 6:31. Please stand for the opening prayer, which will be read by Mr. Jadendra Kumar Pradenji, Hindu priest from the Shiv Mandri Temple, Auburn. Thank you.
Good evening to all. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amrutam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The meaning of this sloka: lead us from the unreal to real, lead us from darkness to light, lead us from the dead to immortality. Om peace, peace, peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Darug people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Please remain standing for the national anthem. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Mr. General Manager.
Good evening. Please be advised that the open session of this council meeting will be recorded and streamed live on council's website. This recording will also be archived and be made available on council's website. Whilst all care will be taken to maintain the privacy of the public gallery, members of the public may be recorded. Council requests that all members of the public are respectful and use appropriate language. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNulty. Are there any apologies? Councillor Addy, I believe, is an apology. Are there any other apologies? And I've been told that Councillor Sarkis is running late. Can I move an acceptance of the apology? Move Councillor Wong. Seconded Councillor Christou. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Council, can I have moved that the ordinary council meeting held on the 1st of August be confirmed? Move Councillor Christou, seconded Councillor Saha. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, I just would like to make note of Monday morning, both the General Manager and myself were able to attend the official Gidget House opening, which is now located on the level 1 at Stocklands, which will have 2 consultative rooms for hopefully treating parents that are going through postnatal depression. They're working in conjunction with Tresillian and Karatani as well, seeking advice from them. They're specialising in non-English speaking and for those of you who had the unfortunate opportunity to witness some of my TV stardom, I apologise, but it's especially for the jumper I was wearing. I think it's a great initiative, and it was opened by the Minister for Health, Brad Hazzard, and I think in this community with such diversity, I hope it can benefit a lot of our residents. So I just want to put that out there. I do have what was the jumper you were wearing? It was just a jumper, Councillor Grove. Yes.
Hang on, you're a Parramatta supporter, aren't you?
Oh, I may add that we had Nathan Highmarsh there and Tim Manor too, so.
Okay, well, that's not, I asked that you withdraw your apology.
Oh, but
If it
duly
was a
noted.
Bulldogs one, yes, you would not be here if that was
Okay.
the case.
I'll withdraw that apology then. Thank you. I have, well, it was going to be, we weren't sure. I was considering having heard in the news that the City of Parramatta Council have put forward a motion for a donation, and I know I did receive a motion, a matter of urgency from Councillor Rami, but if we could put up the one I was thinking of first, and if Council are comfortable with that. So basically that Council recognises and supports the rural New South Wales farming communities who are facing a devastating drought by making and as we've been challenged by Councillor Esbar on the Ray Hadley show, especially with the adjoining councils around the City of Parramatta, I know they've contributed, or they've said they've contributed 25,000. I'm more than happy to make it now as a 25,000 donation to the big drought appeal, and that Council lobby the state and federal governments to provide further financial support to the New South Wales rural farming communities. Well, if I've moved it as it shouldn't be, I'll take it that if there's no dissent, it'll be moved unanimously by the councillors present in the chamber. So with that, we'll make it a mayoral minute. Thank you. And I'll put it then, if there's no discussion. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried unanimously. Councillor Saha, I believe you have a matter of urgency.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I bring before the Chamber a matter of public importance that recognizes Indian Independence Day. On 15th August each year, Independence Day recognizes Indian separation from British rules. It is a day that marks the birth of a free and democratic nation that is now regarded as one of the greatest democracy of the modern world. On 15th August 1947, the first Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Nehru, raised the Indian flag over the Red Fort in Delhi for the first time. It is a day of immense celebration and pride. I therefore move this motion of urgency on this day in the Cumberland Council. The Cumberland Council recognizes Indian Independence Day and its importance to our Indian-Australian Cumberland community. Cumberland Council Mayor and Councillors wish everyone a very happy Indian Independence Day.
Second, Councillor Wong. Because there's limited time left to the 15th of August, I'm accepting that as a matter of urgency. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Saha?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and happy Indian Independence Day to all my friends in the Cumberland Council and those who celebrate. So I'm very proud to represent the large Indian community in the Cumberland Council, and especially in the Wentworthville ward. According to the 2016 census, the largest non-English speaking country of birth in Wentworthville was India, which is 30% of the total population living in the Wentworthville. Today we are celebrating the 18th anniversary of India's independence. We have a vibrant Indian community. We have a large Tamil community at Pendle Hill, large Gujarati community at Wentworthville, and a large Telugu community at in Pemul Way. I'm proud that we are such a harmonious, strong, and culturally diverse community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saha. Does anybody wish to speak against the matter of urgency? No one? Well, then I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, I have a speaker for item CO8/18-157, the Local Heritage Subcommittee, and then I have a public forum question on community and human rights. I'll go to Mr. Tony Oldfield. Could you come to the rostrum, please? Mr. Oldfield, you will have 3 minutes to speak, but on that item there has been asked for a minor amendment by Councillor Campbell, and I don't know if you'll have the actual resolution there, but it's as in item 1, not proceed at this stage with the formation of any of the Auburn, Holroyd and Granville local heritage committees. I just wanted to point that out to you before you carried out your speech. So,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Oldfield. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to thank the councillors and the Mayor for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I was actually going to speak in opposition to part of the recommendation that the formation of an Auburn subcommittee of the Heritage Committee not proceed. Firstly, I think now we actually satisfy the minimum numbers of 5 community members that are required to form that subcommittee. I believe that Karen Stanton, who's a member of the Cumberland Heritage Subcommittee, is prepared to also nominate for the Auburn Subcommittee. She didn't, because she didn't believe that she was entitled to serve on both committees. But further to that, I've had some discussions with former members of the Auburn Heritage Committee, and at least 3 of them are willing to serve on the subcommittee. And if we're able to, we'll forward nomination forms for those 3 people. I think there's a lot of work for an Auburn subcommittee to do, and Cumberland Heritage Committee, it's a big area, and we believe that we need to have a specific focus on heritage issues and items in Auburn and particularly Lidcombe. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Oldfield? No. Thank you, Mr. Oldfield. I'll go to the public forum question, which, as I stated, on community and human rights. Mr. David Burrows, could you come to the rostrum, please? I think you're quite familiar, as was Mr. Oldfield, with the procedures of the meeting, so you'll have 3 minutes to address council. Thank you, Mr. Burrows.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for your time yet again. So over the last 2 months, I've asked quite a few questions of council and councillors. I appreciate that it takes time to consider and prepare formal responses to each question I've asked, and I look forward to reading them. But however, I fear that I will have to burden you all a little bit more, as I'm requesting a formal response from the council and from each councillor to my questions tonight. And as my questions will be brief and focus on the values and vision of councillors and council, I'd appreciate a direct response now from each councillor in this public forum, at least to the first question. So, elected councillors, each of you committed to protecting the human right to housing. Is Cumberland Council as a whole committed to protecting the human right to housing? And what will councillors and council do to demonstrate this commitment?
As is the as per the code of meeting practice, any question asked of a councillor is purely up to that councillor whether he'd like to, or whether they would like to answer that question now. Obviously, any that aren't, your question will be forwarded by email to every councillor with your contact details. I'll leave it open to the floor if any councillor would like to address Mr Burrows now. No? Councillor Lake?
I find, look, I think my colleagues would agree that the answers are yes and yes. And the answer to the third question is that we are currently commencing a residential housing strategy for the whole of Cumberland that has to be workshopped. But I think probably our manager of planning could talk a little bit more about the scope of that and the timelines involved. But that's the way we intend to address the issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Burrows. Oh, sorry, Councillor Grove.
I'd just flag that my view on this sort of matter is that any approach and policy change needs to be taken at the level of the Metropolitan Basin.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Thank you, Mr Burrows. Council, I'd like to go through the list and see if there are any items you'd like identified to discuss, and otherwise we'll move in bulk. So, Council, item 150, the investment report. Does anybody wish to discuss that item? No. The local government annual conference 2018, and I will preempt that by saying that the council will call for interested councillors, those who wish to attend that conference in Albury. So if apart from that, is there any discussion on that with the amendment of the second item where it quotes years 10, currently quotes years 10 to be reduced to 5 years. So is there any discussion on that required?
Just by way of future practice, I think there's merit to us resolving throughout the year. I note that a number of councils sort of go on this mad dash to create policy motions out of thin air, and some councils have more of an attachment to these motions than others. And I think if we've got something we're particularly passionate about, let's consider a report on it during the year, pass the resolution to lodge the motion, and put it in there, rather than have some poor staff member in some dingy corner of the organisation start ratting through the entire organisation trying to find something to slip into a council report before we send people to the conference. I'd also flag my interest in attending the conference.
Okay, well, we'll take them. It's just, and I take your point, Councillor Grove, and it's valid, but we have to get the motions in by Sunday, the 26th of August. But as for the actual delegates, we do not need to identify them. Well, we'd have to identify them by 5 p.m. on the 2nd of October. So we do have that time up our sleeve. So does anybody wish to discuss that item further? No. The Audit and Risk Improvement Committee report. Anybody wish to discuss that item? I will note that our chairman is present, and if there was questions, if that item needs to be discussed, he would be available to answer, but I do thank him for attending. No? The tender evaluation report for the air conditioning upgrade, Maryland's office? No. The draft children protection policy? No. Question, Councillor Garrard. The 155, the Westmead and Wentworthville plan precinct update. Councillor Lake. 156, the fourth quarter performance report and delivery program. No. The local heritage subcommittees, yes. The 158, the Cumberland Local Heritage Rebate Program, 2018. No. The Cumberland Heritage Committee minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July 2018. No. We have a notice of motion. Obviously that'll have to be put. And then we have two that, if they need to be discussed, will have to go into closed council, and that is item 161, tender evaluation report, receivable and processing of garden organics. Does anybody need to discuss that? No? And then item 162, the tender evaluation report, supply and distribution of household organic bins. Does anybody need to discuss that? No? Okay. Then can I have a motion? Was that Councillor Elmore or Councillor Wong? Councillor Wong. Second, I think it was Councillor Christou. Was it Councillor Okay, Councillor Christou. And I'll run through them so we're clear. That item CO8/18, 150, the investment report. 151, the Local Government New South Wales Conference 2018. 152, the Audit Risk Improvement Committee and Chairperson's Annual Report 2017-18. The Tender Evaluation Air Conditioning 153, Air Conditioning Upgrade of Maryland's Administrative Office. The fourth quarter, 156, the fourth quarter performance report on delivery program 217-21 and operational plan 217-18. The 158, Cumberland Local Heritage Rebate Program 2018. 159, Cumberland Heritage Committee minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July 2018. 161, the tender evaluation report, receivable and processing of garden organics. And 162, tender evaluation report T2818 to 012, supply and distribution of household organic bins. And I've had that moved. Councillor Wong, seconded Councillor Christou. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, page 81. And that's Councillor Garrard. That's item CO8/18 154, the draft child protection policy. Councillor Garrard.
Mr Mayor, through you to the council, to the General Manager, is it envisaged that this policy would require a statement or, you know, official statement by councillors?
Mr McNulty.
Councillor Garrett, what sort of statement are you? Well, in terms of child protection, there's general documentation that needs to be. Staff who work with children need to be thoroughly checked out. Yeah. And does that apply to councillors as well? Councillor Garrett, I believe in your role as councillors, your interaction with children would only be incidental, so it's probably not required. Well, politicians don't kiss babies, is that what you're saying?
I don't think it's part of our...
That's in their political role.
I don't believe so at this stage, but I'll get some further advice and just confirm that for you. Quite frankly, I think it is important. I mean, you know, I think at a federal level it's required. I think at a state level it's required. Okay. I think so. And I don't understand why it's not here. My understanding is that if your interaction with children is only incidental and not frequent, that the working with children checks aren't required. But as I say, I'll confirm that for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take your point, councillor Garrard, but it is going out for exhibition for 28 days. So we can make sure that if that's required, that it is part of the document coming back if councillors are required to have a working with children.
Would you need that if most of the complaints you get are childish complaints?
Well, I got councillor Grave. Councillor Grave.
Yes, Mr Mayor, Councillor Garrard is correct. I'm not sure whether it's working with children checks, but I know the Office of the Children's Guardian requires a number of bits and pieces of documentation, and they've required those bits and pieces since the Orcopolis events transpired. There was some legislation at the time, and I believe if you're elected and you don't lodge, you can potentially be thrown out of Parliament. I don't know what the rules are federally. I'm sure we don't have the right as a council to compel working with children's check. I've got one. I think it's probably a worthwhile thing just for us to say that we have.
You're working with
But,
Wilson, though.
well, it's actually for my... I was going to say I'm also working with one of your children.
I could say best of luck.
And I can't agree with that because that's not in the interests of my employer. Oh boy, where have we gone? That's related to my role with a children's organisation, which is not City of Parramatta Council. But yeah, look, I think it's probably a good thing for us as leaders in our community to have, so it's transportable elsewhere.
Take your point. I did have councillor Lake and then councillor Christie who jumped around, but I still have nothing before me before I keep going through.
Oh, well, I'll move the recommend. I'll second the
Councillor
recommendation.
Garrard has moved, and I take it councillor Lake is second.
I'll second the recommendation,
you.
Mr Mayor. I just wanted to point out that Children's Services have done a remarkable and incredibly prompt job in getting this policy together. You'll see that it gives appointed to the Royal Commission final report recommendations. They were only handed down last year, and they relate to there was aspects of those that related to local government, and our Children's Services Department have hopped onto that really fast and got this policy together. I think it's probably the first council that's done that, and I hope that we can bring this policy to the attention of other councils so that they too can adopt those very recent recommendations of the Royal Commission.
Adoption of the recommendation, of course, in the proviso with information I'm seeking from the gentleman.
And we'll make sure that the information is included for the during the 28-day exhibition period. Councillor Christou?
I was going to second the motion, but in general, I do support the idea, even if it's not compulsory to have one. I do have one. I encourage the rest of my colleagues to obtain one and hand it in voluntarily. There's no harm, and it's very important to show our support. I think this is a very well-written policy that our team's come up with, so, yeah.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. Councillor Sarkis?
Yeah, the checks last for 5 years, is that correct? Right, so, yeah, you'd have to renew them every 5 years, because I did have one when my daughter first started school, but that was a little bit more than 5 years ago now, so I'm assuming that mine's gone, so I'd have to renew that as well.
All right. Right of reply, Councillor Garrard? Right of reply?
Nothing to reply to.
Thank you.
Only the comments made by
I'll put it then. Councillor Garrard and moved, and seconded Councillor Lake. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillor Lake, item CO8/18155, Westmead Wentworthville Plan Precinct Update.
Find it. There it is. Sorry, I kicked it away. Look, I fully support the recommendations and I'll move them, Mr Mayor.
You continue, Councillor Lake. Is there a second for that? I think I've got Councillor Saha first. Yes, please continue, councillor.
For councillors who haven't had a look at this momentous document, this is the planning and placemaking strategy for the Wentworthville Town Centre. Holroyd Council commenced development of this back in about 2013, and to do this work they were funded by the state government. And since they commenced the work, they undertook community engagement and they engaged experts to undertake economic, traffic and urban design studies to inform the outcome. The strategy came to the IHAP in 2016 and then was adopted by the council under the administrator. And our planning officers then turned it into a planning proposal, which has just received gateway determination. That came through in about May this year. Interestingly, the gateway decision requires council to update its development's contributions plan and also to amend the proposal to include provisions for contributions to state public infrastructure. So the state government is well aware of this proposal and also sees it as an opportunity to create further infrastructure, public infrastructure for Wentworthville. So once those amendments are made, the planning proposal will then go on public exhibition, and I think if you speak to Mr Davis, he's planning to have that done before the end of the year. This urban revitalisation of the town centre is estimated, in my reading, to increase Wentworthville's population by about 7,000 people, with about 2,500 additional dwellings being created in the town centre. And that's what the plan's about. It's to deliver housing, additional housing in the centre itself, close to jobs and services and transport. And we've seen the upgrading of the Wentworthville railway station in the last 12 months. So having seen all this work, it's completely beyond me to understand why the Department of Planning has started up quite a separate planning process for housing in Wentworthville. It originally called it the Wentworthville Priority Precinct last year, but I see it now, it's been rebadged to the Wentworthville Planned Precinct, so the priority aspect has been dropped. But this process is quite separate to this planning proposal. The department's process kicked off in about June last year with a media release, and then they had a drop-in session down at the Wentworthville Community Centre, and I went along to that with other local residents. Look, it was an interesting session. We were shown a map of Wentworthville with a circle around it, which was the suburb of Wentworthville. And we were given blank butcher's paper and texters and asked to write ideas about what we would like to see happen in Wentworthville. Now, Wentworthville residents they've done this a few times now. They're pretty good at it. So we all got to work and we wrote on our butcher's paper, you know, more libraries and a bigger library, more green space, you know, outdoor dining, all the sorts of things the Wentworthville community has told everyone before. But the drop-in session provided no information to the community whatsoever. And while I was there, I looked for the planning director and I found him, and I asked what were the boundaries of this proposal, and he said, well, we haven't determined that yet. And I looked at the map and I pointed to my street and I said, well, I live there, are you going to rezone this? And he said, oh, well, we haven't figured that out yet. And I asked him to explain how the department's work would relate to the council's planning proposal for the town centre. And again, you know, I said to him, are you going to override this? Or are you going to leave this and do something in addition to it? What's going on? And again, he just wasn't really sure. So that was an interesting drop-in session and we all dropped out. The media release said that the department was working closely with council. So I thought, well, I'll ring council's offices. I wasn't a councillor at the time, so I just gave them a call, asked them what it was all about, and they very honestly said to me, well, we don't really know either. So 14 months on, we still don't know what this is all about. What we do know, however, is that we have this existing planning proposal and that it can only be properly considered by the council if we can consider it knowing that the controls in the broader local context are going to be left alone. Otherwise, you know, we can't set planning controls that are going to increase density to this level wondering whether or not
Your
density,
time
I'll
has,
ask for an extension,
if you'd like an extension.
just a short one.
Moved
Yeah.
councillor Sarkis, seconded councillor Rami. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Thank you, councillor Lake.
So what we know is that if we're going to have a serious look at this, and we're going to have to vote on this at some point after public consultation takes place, how can we confidently make any planning decisions about Wentworthville's future ourselves if we don't know what the department is considering for in the broader context of Wentworthville? We can't. So what I'm saying tonight is we need the department to take a step back from this and allow the council and our officers to finish the job that the state government actually agreed that we should do and assisted us in funding to have it done. So I support the recommendations.
Thank you, councillor Lake. I do have councillor Grove, but before I will make some comment. I think it was 3 weeks ago now, Mr. McNulty, we did have Lucy Turnbull, the Commissioner for the Greater Sydney Committee, here in this chamber, and we also had, I'll use the term, her second in charge, Natalie Camazuli, for this area. We did point out that they need to review all the work that the officers have done, especially in the Wentworthville precinct. Hopefully, and we will keep lobbying, especially Miss Camazuli, to make sure that there is recognition of all the work that's been done and all the consultation. Councillor Grove, do you wish to speak against?
I wish to ask Mr Davis some questions if
Okay.
Yourself and the General
If
Manager...
we allow
let
Mr
me-
Davis time to come in behind the petition.
Yeah.
Councillor Grove.
So I've got this report before me, which doesn't really tell me anything new that the department wouldn't have known before they declared the priority precinct. And so my curiosity is, what argument does council have that the Department of Planning would be prepared to listen to in, dropping this? It's kind of like, going to Israel and Palestine and telling them, oh, could you please stop fighting, and expecting them to say, oh, okay, we didn't know it was bad. I'm just a little bit lost as to what the case is that we're going to go to the Department of Planning with, to ask them, maybe this is not a good idea.
Mr Davis.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So this arose at what's been the second PCG. I think we mentioned this in the report. Discussion initiated by Parramatta Council around what was going on elsewhere in the LGA. We particularly talked about how we've been doing a lot of work in the Wentworthville Town Centre, and that was probably going to be council's priority for the precinct. The department, look, their officers simply advised, get a position, whatever your position of your council is, and we're happy to look at it. Now, so they made no promises, but essentially said that, if your council has a view on the Wentworthville precinct, we're happy to look at it. So that's as simple as it was. What I can say is, without giving away too much detail, is that the people from the department working on this and the Westmead precinct, quite clearly their main emphasis is on Westmead. They see that as the, from a district perspective, it is probably the most significant precinct in this location, and so that's their main focus.
Case. Thank you, Mr Davis. I'll ask the mover for an amendment, only a minor amendment. I just ask that we receive briefings in plural from the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment on the Westmead and planned precincts. I'd almost ask that they be put on separate nights, because they are two separate precincts. And certainly, if you're asking us to stop Westmead, we'd be having an argument tonight. The only concern I have is that we, and I know Councillor Lake didn't welcome this process, but the former Holroyd Council welcomed the declaration and quite cooperative throughout the entire process. I'm not sure what's changed really, since that particular point in time. But I'm happy to play ball, and let's do that right away, because I do think the Westmead precinct probably should take priority to the Wentworthville precinct, and I think we should get a proper brief on both.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Lake, do you accept that amendment?
Accept the yes after the word briefing, yes, thank you.
And Councillor Saha, do you accept? Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to speak against the motion? No? Right of reply, Councillor Lake?
Just briefly in relation to the Westmead precinct, I think the reason why we're all interested in seeing where they're going with that is because, as I understand the work that was done in Holroyd Council before 2012, that southern side of Westmead that was part of Holroyd, now part of Cumberland, wasn't actually examined to any great extent for the 2013 LEP. Would that be right?
Mr Davis?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that is correct. The Westmead precinct during that process was not able to be looked at through the LEP initially because it was under the state environmental planning policy at the time.
Councillor Grave, do you have a question?
Yes, a question. My memory's starting to come back, and I do remember some discussion. Yeah, this is declared a priority precinct, and I thought part of the package of a priority precinct is where you start, doing your planning with your infrastructure. And so, I'm kind of surprised that there are no defined boundaries to this precinct today. Considering the issues around around the road network interface with the Wentworthville precinct, with the Westmead precinct, I can understand why you do them both at the same time if you're trying to deal with the transport network and the road network. But it sounds to me, just based on this report, that there's a lot of discussion around rezoning. Has the state government, through the Department of Planning, done any studies on road network upgrades, prioritisation thereof? I mean, the City of Parramatta had the ring road concept, which had merit.
Mr.
Surely
Davis.
some of this would accelerate some of those projects.
Mr Mayor, so it is still at the early stages of what is a fairly long process, and essentially it's the technical background studies that are being worked on at the moment. So they're around, I've summarised them, they were summarised in the report, but they're essentially analysing constraints, traffic and transport, like movement analysis, travel demand, traffic modelling, also what engineering services like flooding, drainage, contamination. So it's all that sort of background information. There's certainly that's been the extent, I suppose, of the work that's done to date, or certainly.
So what they've done that stuff?
They're in the process of doing that at the moment, and will be on. So that should be completed to I think September this year. So they're a bit behind the original schedule, but they're working on that at the moment.
I've got to get a job at that place.
I will note that was, I was being lenient, that was purely a question, because technically debate is finished if Councillor Lake has finished her reply. So with that, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. We have item CO8/18-157 Local Heritage Subcommittee. I know there are two people who wish to speak on this, Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Grove. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move the motion as amended there with the words "at this stage." And
Councillor Wong.
And the reason I do that is because there may not be enough people, or weren't enough people at the time this report was written to form the Auburn Heritage Committee. There are now, and I think that it's also worthwhile leaving it open for Holroyd and Granville, just in case more people turn up. But I found it very easy to gather together an additional 10 people, that is in addition to the 4 named in this report, who would like to join the Auburn Heritage Committee. So that's 10 and another 3 who are maybes. So that would give us a lot more than the threshold required by the current policy. I was on the Auburn Heritage Committee, and I know that it was abruptly terminated with the suspension of Auburn Council, and there's still some bad feeling amongst former members about that, the way that came about. But nevertheless, there is a strong interest in heritage in the Auburn Lidcombe areas. People look forward to the opportunity to get involved in preserving heritage in the area. But I think that as a council, we should always value maximising the involvement of the community in a whole range of activities. And this is one opportunity to do that. If all of these people get involved, and if more people get involved in all kinds of things around the place, we have a much more vibrant community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Grave, do you wish to speak against the motion, or do you have a question?
No, I'd simply echo Councillor Campbell's comments. I might float the idea of some changes, simply because, and I've said this before, this council is not a community. It's a service provider. It was created to provide services to a number of communities, and the idea that we would, we would only get, in the case of Auburn, 4 people, and Holroyd 2. Holroyd had a population of 108,000 before it was dissolved, and the idea that we're going to get 2 people from a former city of 100,000 people. I just, it's bullcrap. There's no 2 ways around it. We certainly have more people who are interested in being on this committee than have nominated. I think we should be going out to invite additional nominees for the period of a month, have it reported back up, get this thing up and running as quickly as possible. I can't, I just think, particularly on something like heritage is about local stories. It's about, it's about actual particular communities and what those groups are interested in inside a geographic context. I don't expect, and I'll say it because he's here, I don't expect Tony Oldfield to be overly interested. He might be, I could be wrong, in, say, Linwood and Prospect Hill. But I expect the locals, and we're a service provider, we should be providing a service to our locals who are interested in that stuff to be part of that subcommittee. And I think the former LGAs create good lines of communities of interest for that purpose. So I'd happily ask that we go back out and collect additional nominations, not ask the existing people who've already nominated resubmit. I think that's stupid and bureaucratic. I think we just go out and seek additional nominations for the period of a month or whatever, and have them reported back to council so that we can get on the job of creating these committees.
Councillor Campbell, you're happy with that addition?
Yes.
And Councillor Wong, yes. Let's let them finish typing. Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to speak against the motion? Nobody? Right of reply, Councillor.
Just a clarification, I don't know if Councillor Grove is aware, there is a sitting heritage committee, but it's yes, and it's met a couple of times, and quite a number of the old Holroyd Heritage Committee members have put themselves forward onto that committee. So we do have a committee. At the last meeting, 1, 2, 3, 4, we had 8 community members at the last meeting. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Right of reply, Councillor Garrow.
Yes,
my apologies.
Yes, you corrected me just before I called a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
You were once.
Well,
Still time for reduction, Paul?
Just a couple of points. I thank Councillor Grove for his comments, and he did make a very important point about the local nature of this. And it's okay having a Cumberland-wide committee, but he is perfectly correct that people at one end of Cumberland don't know much about the heritage situation at the other end and aren't very highly motivated in getting involved there. The Auburn committee, I forget how many people on it, but it was at least 12, I think. And these people didn't just disappear, but Cumberland Council wasn't able to find them. And I did inquire of a couple of people if they received letters from Cumberland Council announcing that there was a possibility of an Auburn Heritage Committee being formed. And one person was rather puzzled about that. Somebody else said no. Now, how is it possible that the great big search that went on dug up 4 people? Three of those people named in the report I actually spoke to before that, but in the 10 people who I gathered and the 3 maybes, some were, but I can tell you that those 13 people I approached in one day, so I probably should have done it a month ago, but it's not that difficult to find people who are interested in heritage if you think about how to go about doing it and you put your heart into it. But if one just goes through the minimum processes of putting a 8-point font ad in a local newspaper or something, then that might not be the best way to do it. Oh, one other point I'd like to make too is, oh yes, sorry, it was a point that I just already made about how do you find people, and maybe the way in which the council staff went about it wasn't the best possible way.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. That closes debate. I'll put the motion. Moved Councillor Campbell, seconded Councillor Wong. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, before I go to the notice of motion, we have received, the General Manager has received a text message from Councillor Zareka. He is ill, so I'm asking, with the Council's permission, that he be... moved Councillor Sarkar, seconded Councillor Hamid. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you, Council. I must have missed that. My apologies. Council, I have a item CO8/18160, notice of motion, Cumberland Business Service Directory. It is put forward by Councillor Rami and Councillor Christou. I take it you're moving, Councillor Rami? You're seconding, Councillor Christou?
I will be seconding. I do propose a slight amendment, which I have spoken to Councillor Rami about earlier in the day.
Would you like to clarify that before I ask Councillor Rami to speak to it?
No, we'll let Councillor Rami speak.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you're right? Okay. Yeah, look, I just ask that if it is Council's will that we do bring back a report, any further actions based on the report be workshopped. So that's all. We just add that to the amendment.
Propose to go. Okay, there, first item. Thank you.
After the report come back, that it be workshop.
Yep.
If it is Council's will, that we go to a report, yeah.
Yep.
That it be workshop. That's
all right. Thank you. Councillor Rami.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't take too much of everyone's time, but this motion came about as a result of the great initiative that happened a week or so ago, being the Meet Your Councillor sessions, which we had on Saturdays. I know for the Granville ward and my fellow Granville representatives would agree that Granville Town Hall was very productive. We had a lot of people come through and, you know, voice their opinions, give us feedback, give us words of encouragement. Others, you know, not so encouraging. But all in all, it was a great initiative, and one that I'd encourage council to continue, particularly for our ward, at the risk of sounding selfish, because I know some other wards that maybe didn't go as well. So basically, we had a number of small business owners from the LGA, not only from the Granville ward, come in and allude to this directory. Hence why Councillor Christo and I have moved this motion today, or I've moved it and he's seconded it. Given the difficulties that small business are facing in this current day, we believe it's very fitting that council tries to support, and given that we need and want town centres to flourish, and we want to keep people and their funds within our LGA, again, we feel that a business services directory that is up on council's website and that allows small businesses to opt in and put their hand up for their business to be advertised, and then on the flip side, or on the opposite side, allows residents to go to this directory as a first point of call for all kinds of goods and services, is something that would really be beneficial to the constituents of the Cumberland LGA. It's also good timing given the upcoming workshop that I'm seeing in our calendars for the website and the customer facing aspect of the website. So it's actually a good tie-in to maybe, for this to be spoken about or further developed. And as Councillor Christo alluded to, at this stage, we're not asking for it to actually happen. We're just asking for it to be costed up, an analysis to be done, for it to come back to us. And then as a chamber, we'll make a decision as to whether we want it to go to a workshop or not. And if we agree, then it goes to a workshop. So there's still a number of steps. We're not pushing it through now, but it's definitely something we want to put on the agenda. And one that I don't envisage will be very costly. It'll be quite cost effective, but the value that I believe small business and residents will get out of it will be enormous. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rami. I have Councillor Sarkis, then Councillor Hamid, then Councillor Garrard, then Councillor Campbell. Councillor Sarkis, are you speaking in favour of the resolution?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm speaking in favour of it. Mr Mayor, I wholeheartedly support the concept. If I recall, in about 2006 or 2007, Holroyd Council, as it was known back then, implemented a very similar strategy where we had local businesses on a database. It wasn't to the effect where they had advertising, but they were actually listed as businesses within the LGA. And that's probably a base of where this would start from. It's a great concept. I know when it first was launched, it went really well, but we didn't monitor it after then. It was monitored by council staff, but it did start off and go very well. The concept, I think, is a Yellow Pages concept that's incorporated with council's website, and that's a phenomenal step forward if we do that as a council to help the businesses in our LGA. Again, well done to the movers of the motion, and again, I wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you, Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Hamid, are you speaking for or against? Against, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'm proud to say that we have a variety of thriving businesses and across our LGA who are contributing to our society and our community, and most of which are doing a really good job. And we need to do all we can to support them. Businesses across Cumberland Council contribute $9 billion to our economy. They provide 85,000 jobs, which I am proud to say equates to almost 10% of the Greater Western Sydney employment. However, Mr Mayor, not all businesses do the right thing, and there are quite a number of issues that are brought to our attention here at Cumberland Council, and there are quite a lot of issues that aren't brought to our attention. And I'll mention food safety concerns, occupational health and safety, etc. Believe it or not, there's human trafficking concerns. It's a thing. Thank you, Councillor Elmore, for sharing this. I wanted to quote the Salvation Army, and I quote, "Human trafficking and slavery crimes are taking place in the LGAs. New South Wales and the Sydney region have the highest number of victims referred for investigation to the Australian Federal Police since 2004, unquote. Non-English speaking people are easier to take advantage of and to exploit. And with a huge proportion of our population from non-English speaking backgrounds. We have a serious problem. You see, Mr. Mayor, my concern is that some in our community will take this as an endorsement for all businesses. We don't know which businesses are good ones, and we certainly know which one. We do know some of the businesses that are great, but we don't know all of the business who are not doing so good. I want our council, I want this council to support our much needed businesses across our LGA. However, this is not the way to go about it. In fact, in my view, this would be a distraction from some of the work that we're already doing. It's really great stuff. Mr. Mayor, I fail to see the value in it. How will this help business? Is creating and maintaining a database or a list really actually providing real value to business? What can this do that Google cannot? Get on Google, not only does it give you a list of businesses in the area, but it gives you ratings, it gives you their menu options, it gives you their trading hours, etc. We have a wonderful business engagement officer whose skills can be utilised to actually providing real support for businesses in this area. Consulting, educating, forming strategies, marketing workshops. This is how we support business. This is how we support business to succeed and to prosper, not by building lists. My concern is that in the presence of Google, no one will utilise this database. I appreciate my fellow councillors' intentions, that they are trying to support local businesses. However, I will not be supporting this motion for the reasons I stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. Councillor Garrard, are you speaking for or against the motion?
I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard.
Mr. Mayor.
Good patriots.
Look, I listened to the comments carefully there, but I think the resolution has some merit. Unfortunately, it doesn't go. I don't think it goes far enough. The whole basis to our economic development strategy should be about knowing what businesses we have inside our council area. Place management plays a big role in that, and certainly Councillor Hammond spoke about the business engagement officer and the like. That needs to be involved in this as well. I'm supporting it because it seeks a report, and I'm hoping the report can not only answer the issues that are raised here and promote aspects of those comments, but also put the other side of the story, which some comments have been made already, which have substance. But at the end of the day, if we're going to go down a track of economic development in a real sense inside our area of Cumberland, well then we need to have a very good fingerprint of just what makes up the business community. And it's down that line that I think this motion should be sussing out, so to speak. So I'd like to know inside the organisation how a lot of this could be implemented. I don't think it's just about finding someone to fix up get an electrician. There's more than that. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to be helping business generally. And how do you help business? So having them identified, I know it can be a costly exercise, this too. You see, at the end of the day, if it goes on our website, we become responsible for what is going to be there. And you can't have out-of-date information on the website. So therefore, there needs to be someone fully employed on ensuring that, number one, businesses are there, and number two, that businesses that don't exist any longer aren't there, and that the details to those businesses are actually up to date. It's no good, for instance, I remember an organisation that I had something to do with promoting the fact that the general manager of Shell, but he was dead 5 years ago, right? Now, you need to have all of this information
if you're going to make it a reality in real time, it's got to be accurate. And that wouldn't be the challenge for what makes this resolution, how it's implemented and how it interfaces with our business opportunities and our community responsibilities there into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Campbell, are you speaking for or against the motion?
For.
Thank you.
I intend voting for the motion, Mr Mayor, although I do have some reservations in relation to it. And I think I'm concerned at the, well, let me say that the change that Councillor Christo has put in there has made it easier for me to vote for this, because it subjects the report to being workshopped before we further deal with it. And I think that I'm voting for it because there will be a report with information which can then be discussed. And we're not, as Councillor Rami said, we're not moving to implement things tonight. My reservations are this could constitute free advertising for businesses paid for by the council or council expense. It could imply endorsement of those businesses, and I think Councillor Hamid went into a bit of detail about some of the dangers involved in appearing to endorse particular businesses. There are online services now that people can explore to find the type of business they want within a certain distance of home. And perhaps this is a good idea that businesses could implement themselves without the council doing it for them. If they organise themselves and got together, they could do that without involving council. So there is a cost to council in doing this. A cost to council, of course, is a cost to the community. And I'm certainly not clear to me what the cost effectiveness of this would be, and what council is to get out of it. So I think in my mind there are a lot of questions to be answered, but as I said, I'll vote for it because there will be a report and some of these matters will be addressed, and there will be enough for us to discuss when the report comes in.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Christo, I believe you would be speaking for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Councillor Rami indicated, at Granville we were flat chat. We must have seen 35 to 40 people on the day. I believe we would have been the busiest ward. But one thing that was apparent was that there is a community need and community engagement through the councillors that we need to do something as a council. Now, all we're asking for is a report. I can only speak about my ward. Across the road from Granville, we have Parramatta. We are as a neighbouring city, and we are subjected to monstrosity after monstrosity of high rises and some childcare centres going there. And our workers, our small businesses don't get a look in. People don't know where our facilities are. So it's very simple. We'll get the report, we'll identify what the needs are, and if council want to progress, we move forward. If it's not a meaningful report and council don't want to progress, I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say this ain't going to work. But to say we're just not going to have a report is just very close-minded and not the way you do things as elected representatives. So let's just get the report and we'll take it from there. But I'll tell you one thing, if there's anything we can do to support small businesses and support local jobs, I think we should be looking into it. And just because there might be a directory from council is not a ringing endorsement of a business. You don't go around and blaming Google or the Yellow Pages if a business does the wrong thing. And it'll be the same thing for council as well.
We're the regulator.
Thank you.
Councillor Christo, Councillor Grove, you're speaking for or against?
I'm speaking for, I think my greatest criticism of this motion is that we're only looking at small businesses. We're not looking at manufacturers as well. I would actually, I have to say, I was a bit, I suppose, I was a bit blasé about this motion when I looked at it initially, because there are a number of concerns about the efficacy of such a thing. But then I heard the case against, and I thought, well, I know which side of history I'm on. I know which constituency group I'm on. And when it comes to getting a report, it's an absolute no-brainer. It's basically, there's small businesses out there, and I hope we do include manufacturers soon enough, that this council should be supporting, and providing a platform to list them so that you know where they are. I think is a good thing. I look at this and, hearing cases about food safety, yeah, well, we've got a service for that. We can, we've got a team out there that go in, go after that, kick it out. We've got food safety concerns in this city. We should be doing a better job. We should be doing a better job. With respect to human trafficking and slavery, yes, that's a legitimate issue in the world. And the greatest antidote to that is in Australia. Australian jobs, local jobs, are the best way to combat slavery and the exploitation of the worker. Now, I just put it to you, in Western Sydney, you can get all the clothes I'm wearing made, bar my undies, which I'm wearing, and my socks. Now, if you don't know where to get that locally manufactured product, where do you go? Where do you go? Well, if you don't know, perhaps this is a motion you want to pass. And that's why I say we should also be including manufacturers. If we can't be on Team Cumberland, if we can't be on Team Western Sydney, then all I ask is whose team are we on?
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Elmo? My apologies. Elmore. Speaking for or against?
That was my nickname at school, Mr. Mayor, but I'm speaking against it.
Thank you.
Not that I don't support local business, because local business provides jobs, and I think most of us, when we were at school, we got started a local business, and that was the beginning of our careers. But there is some problems actually. Putting companies on websites it can be a little bit dangerous. We've looked at especially big companies. We've just gone through the Royal Commission of banks and finance companies and superannuation companies, and we found out what sort of practices that they get up to. But certainly, I'm also concerned that we're getting in a competition with other local organisations like our local Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of, and as you know, our local newspapers are fully funded by advertisers, and they're advertising small businesses mainly. And I don't really want to go into competition with them, because I enjoy reading our local papers, and if the advertisers if we're getting free advertising elsewhere and not going to local newspapers, they won't exist.
Councillor Elmore. Councillor Zeta.
Mr. Mayor, I'll support this motion to get the report so we can consider this issue further. But I think one way that we can help local businesses, and local businesses doesn't mean small business, it's medium business and big business, to get ahead financially, is to possibly review the way that we evaluate our tender process. We're looking at evaluating a tender later on tonight. If you go through the criteria that council looks at, the first criteria they look at is the compliance criteria. The second is they look at whether the candidates actually demonstrate experience. Then they look at the key personnel, knowledge and experience. Then they look at the schedule methodology, then value-added services, and finally schedule of fees. But no one actually looks at where the locality of that business is. We don't give any weighting for our local businesses in our evaluation of our tenders. We really should be doing this. We need to consider whether we want to try and retain business in this local area and spend our money locally. In order to do that, aside from getting this report, it's great, we'll get this report, we'll have a look at it, but how are we going to actually help small, medium and large businesses to maintain their jobs in this area? We need to be able to spend as much of our money in our local area. And if that's the case, we really need to assist those businesses in getting as many of our tenders through by possibly including a weighting for the local area, for the businesses located in our local area. And that's something potentially we'll need to talk about at a future date. But that's, I think, one way that we can help our local businesses financially, not simply via putting their names on our websites. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zada. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion? Right of reply, Councillor Rami.
Yeah, I might just answer a few anomalies in some of the discussion, but through you, Mr. Mayor, as has been alluded to numerous times in the last few minutes, all we're asking for is a report. When the report comes back, we'll then make the decision whether to workshop it or not, and during that workshop, a lot of these great ideas that were brought to the surface today, we can go over and discuss and see what gets included and what doesn't. But overall, the way I view this, in whatever form, if it eventually gets approved, is if you support local business, then you're supporting this motion. Just in terms of some of the things raised in the discussion that I'll touch on, I'm not really sure what human trafficking has to do with this motion, but we'll take that on and maybe incorporate it in the workshop. A referral to an abundance of flourishing businesses. Now that's a very valid point, but I'll just draw your attention to a number of hotspots like Wentworthville Town Centre, which are a ghost town and have been a high topic of discussion over the last few years. And we spent countless hours of resources and time and councillor efforts to try and rectify this, none more so than Councillor Lake, which I know is very close to her heart, and it was very close to my heart when I represented the North Ward of Holroyd, and continues to be very close to my heart. I'd also, in reference to this flourishing businesses comment, ask about the people who attended last Saturday, and there was numerous people who attended who had the same problem, be it around childcare centres, be it around small business, other small and local businesses that were finding it very hard to keep their P&Ls flourishing and to keep their head above water, so to speak. A comment was asked or mentioned about how will it help business. Well, this is very simple. It will make people, or the way we see it in the first instance, is that it will make people aware of what businesses and services are available in the local area. As simple as that sounds, that is a benefit. It's basically an advertisement. I know Councillor Campbell made a comment, and you know, it's very valid that it's potentially free advertising, but that's what we want it to be. We want to help our local constituents. That's what council is here for. And it'll provide the conduit for increased revenue generation for the businesses that sign up to it, which is always a great thing. The final point I'll touch on is the point about Google. Now, there's a very big difference between this and Google. That being, for those of you that have worked in the real world and know small business and AdWords and how Google works, being up high on the list in Google when you put a search in the search engine actually costs you a ton of money. That just doesn't happen by coincidence. So when you ask me what's the difference with Google, it's an enormous difference, and it's one that's in most instances insurmountable by local businesses because they don't have the funds to be sitting on top of a Google search. The other difference with Google, and one that I'll take straight out of the book of a lot of councillors that sit on the other side of the table, is the community feel. Now, I know Councillor Lake has raised this numerous times in discussions around developments and shops and what we're going to do, you know, motions that have gone through around Wentworthville, and there's always a comment about, and even when we spoke about having one centralised council building, there was a notion of having a community feel, having people being able to spend time in their own village and go to their village. Well, this is exactly a community feel. The difference between this and Google is this is a directory for the village of the Cumberland LGA and for Wentworthville, for Granville, for the South Ward. So I'm not sure, but you can't really pick your argument when it suits you. It's what's the advantage? Well, this is the community feel that the opposing side has been yearning for. And all we're asking for is a report to then decide whether it's going to be workshopped or not. It didn't even need 30 minutes, just needs a report. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rami. That closes debate. I will put the motion, moved Councillor Rami, seconded Councillor Christou, as written. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried.
Show of hands, that sounded
It didn't sound even to me, Councillor Rami. If two people would like to stand, I'll call for a division.
Let's do that.
Two councillors, I should say. I need two. I've only got one. If you want a division, okay. You've been called for a division. So, show of hands, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Councillor Rami, Councillor Grave, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Wong, Councillor Saha, Councillor Christou, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Elmore, Councillor Lake, Councillor Hummard. I declare that carried. I will declare the meeting closed at 7:52. Thank you. We've already done.